Welcome everybody to the next episode of Cannabis Review. I'm delighted to be joined in this episode by Chris Davis, who's the Executive Director of INCBA, which is the International Cannabis Bar Association. How are you keeping today, Chris?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm fantastic, mate. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this. I know you're a busy man. Do you want to maybe give everybody a quick little overview in under 60 seconds of how you ended up as the Executive Director of the INCBA?
Sure. Yeah. When I came on, it was 2017. So the association was started in 2015 by a group of lawyers in San Francisco that really looked around and saw the need for increased levels of legal services in the industry. So I started volunteering with INCBA. I was in a completely different industry. So I was in securities litigation, and then I was in finance. Really sort of liked the industry, had historical connections to it through family and friends. So when I moved back to California in about 2016, I started doing pro bono work for a few family and friends. Really sort of got up to speed with where the law was at the time and sort of what we needed going into the future. And then was lucky enough to apply for the position and be hired as the executive director. So.
Very good, very good. And the origins of the agency go back to what year and what state, just for everybody who's not aware?
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, it was San Francisco, so California. In about 2015, legalization happened in California back in 1996. So it was legal for quite a while, but it was under a not-for-profit model. So we had collectives and cooperatives that would provide medicine to patients that needed cannabis in order to treat, either for palliative care or for other pain management issues. We looked around and really the group of women that started the association saw a need for lawyers to get together and to speak to each other. There really wasn't a set of best practices. It was an industry that had not really, from the legal side, had not really matured, right? Since it was illegal at the federal level, it was legal at the state level. There was a lot of discomfort with papering any sort of, arrangements among individuals. There was really sort of, everyone was allergic to putting anything down on paper. We were still afraid that the federal government was going to come in, bring seizure actions against individual companies, things like that. And so in order to create those best practices, three women in San Francisco got together and they really said, it would benefit not only us and not only our clients to have everyone sort of be on the same page about how we should do some of these things, but it would benefit us to have the people across the table from us, start from a place of education, start from a place where they knew sort of what the rules are and what they should be and how we should proceed as an industry. So it started off as a networking group. Pretty quickly after that, we got into continuing legal education. So now we put on about 80 hours of continuing legal education each year. This year we have 5 in-person events lined up, 1 in Europe, which would make 6. So we're really excited for that one coming up in Ireland on the 25th. So we've really expanded. We touch on pretty much all facets of the cannabis industry now. So anything from, educating lawyers on how to best serve their clients, to advocacy, to liaisoning with the government. Sort of all of those facets are things that are covered under our banner.
Very good. And what was the first step in towards creating an international association? Was there one specific country from outside the States that got together? Was it what can you tell us on that?
Yeah, it was really interesting. It grew up organically, and so there had always been sort of an eye, right? It was this idea from our beginning that we wanted to fill a space that wasn't currently filled, right? And in terms of international transactions, it really didn't exist. We understood that legalization was sort of rolling across the globe, and there were a lot of lessons to be learned from, how we were doing things in the United States, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. We saw interest, I think one of our first international members, someone that came to one of our cannabis law institutes in Washington, D.C., was a gentleman from Lesotho. And so that really opened our eyes that this was sort of, traveling across the globe. We had a few European members at that point. And so I think we had members from France, from Germany, from Spain, and from Switzerland. And so we sort of saw the writing on the wall that there was going to be a lot of utility from the international perspective, both from those individuals trying to push a regulated market on a domestic level from wherever they were from, but then also sort of laying the groundwork for international transactions. So really it was an organic evolution. We're really excited that now we have our INCBA Europe group. Over the next year or two, we do plan on rolling out those other sort of large geographical portions. So INCBA Latin America, INCBA Africa, those sort of like loose conglomerations of attorneys that serve clients in those jurisdictions as they come online and as they create regulated markets.
Okay, amazing. The next topic and conversation I wanted to have was basically as a compliance professional and a business strategist for people over in Europe who are looking to try and write policy and have policy influence. What states would you be aware of that have the best legal framework in place, or is there a combination of a multitude of states where you could Frankenstein a couple of different policy and create a perfect policy for Europe?
Yeah, it's really the latter. I wouldn't say that any jurisdiction in the United States has gotten it exactly right. And it really depends on what stage of the market you're looking at as we look at the success of individual jurisdictions. For a place like California, right, which is where I sit, as the market's matured, we've run into difficulty because we've really overtaxed some of the entities. We've made it very, very difficult for the legal regulated market, which has a lot of benefits, related to it. We can trace transactions. We have financial tracking of a lot of the companies. We have, the ability to test product to make sure that public health and safety is ensured as we roll out these products and these programs to a wider group of consumers. But here in California, we've really created a system where the illicit market is really able to compete with the legal regulated market, right? And so, although we've done some things right, there's some things that we got sort of wrong in that capacity. It really is about matching your policy goals to the drafting that you put down on paper, right? Whenever we create a complex regulatory system, and for most jurisdictions, this is coming out of nothing, right? So it's a really unique situation in which we're not evolving a regulatory structure, we're coming up with one from scratch. And so those always have unintended consequences. And so, a place like New York has a really robust social equity program that stems from those regulators having a specific set of policy objectives in mind, and then working backwards through the regulations and understanding how to draft a set of regulations that promote those specific policy objectives. And it's a really difficult thing to do. And so really what you have to do as a jurisdiction is you have to understand what you want your ultimate market to look like, right? In Europe, we don't have the same concerns that we do in the United States, using social equity as an example. There is not this history of animus towards, certain sets of individuals. And the drug war has not been used to really, wage a war on certain individuals that we now need to include in the market going forward. And so you don't have that policy goal. So you'd write a set of regulations sort of on a fundamentally different basis. And so really it's about working backward from the market that you want to see. An efficient market that has predictability in transactions, consumer protection, the ability to track and trace some of the products that are going through to make sure that they're not being diverted either out of state in the United States or out of the country in Europe. And really working back from that to make sure that you're having a cohesive regulatory structure that you can overlay on top of an existing market, right? Because that's the other unique thing about the cannabis industry is not only do we not have regulations, and so we're creating this regulatory structure from scratch, but there's an existing set of demand for the product, right? And so in virtually every jurisdiction in which we see legalization occur, it's not because people want to, create access where there was no access before. It's because we want to formalize the access. We want to ensure that there's product testing. We want to ensure that, tax revenue accrues to the government. And so really you're trying to place a regulatory regime on top of an existing market that, to this point has been unregulated. So really it's a piecemeal sort of process. For European regulators that are trying to create these regulatory structures, it's really about going through and understanding what each specific legislature and regulator wanted to see from the end product in each one of these states, right? So what is the purported focus of the regulations, right? What is it to increase your tax revenue through increasing the tax revenue base? Do you want to do that through specific taxes on cannabis related entities? So do you want to have a cultivation tax, or do you want to ensure that each one of these companies that has been created is paying an income tax that's more aligned with traditional taxation, right? And so one of the problems again here in California that we've seen is that We have all these different stages of taxation, but that takes away from the overall tax base, for a company paying into the income tax, right? And so income tax is reduced because we made competition more difficult because we had things like the cultivation tax, which was recently repealed for exactly those reasons.
Amazing, very interesting indeed. Another question, do you think a standardized testing system for the United States when federal legalization comes is going to be easy to implement, or do you still think it'll always be on a state-by-state basis? Surely if there's going to be interstate commerce, there needs to be an overarching spectrum of rules that everybody has to apply by.
Sure. The FDA is never going to give up. So our Food and Drug Administration, right, the dual federalism problem is always going to sort of arise. The Food and Drug Administration, its primary directive is to ensure health and safety of products that are consumable products for individuals, right? Not only consumables, but also cosmetics. They're never going to sort of let go of that jurisdictional, that jurisdictional purview. So we're going to need some sort of national mechanism whereby we can see if products are safe for consumption. That being said, right, like what we've seen in the auto industry in the United States is we have state-by-state regulation, but we have production plants that primarily take place in certain jurisdictions, right? And so we may have all of our cars that are made in Detroit, but California has the most stringent emission standards. And so what happens is those Detroit producers, they have to adhere to the California emission standards because those are the strictest in the country and it's the largest market in the country. And so really what I think naturally before the FDA sort of establishes any of those boundaries, I think that probably we will tend towards whatever one of those largest consumer state has implemented for their testing policies. I think ultimately it's going to be a race to the top as opposed to a race to the bottom. I don't think that we're going to see sort of a relaxation of those health and safety standards. I think that we're going to sort of pick the state that has the most stringent standards, which at this point, is sort of a, there's a competition, but California has very, very stringent standards. And so I think that we're going to see sort of everyone coalesce around what those standards are in order to be able to have a national market for cannabis, in order to be able to be eligible to, ship your product out of a producing state and to access markets like California or New York. We're going to need to sort of, rise to the level of whatever testing they establish there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Last question before I let you go. Which do you think is going to happen first? Safe Banking Act is going to be passed, or a European country is going to develop a recreational market?
That's a great question. Given the dysfunction in our Congress, I think that a European country is gonna establish that adult use market. I know that a couple are on the cusp right now. So I know that the laws in Germany are changing very, very quickly. I look forward to seeing what happens in Europe. I think that the only way that the Safe Banking Act potentially beats the implementation of an adult use market in Europe is if it gets, sort of snuck into one of the larger bills that we have passing. But our House of Representatives is, doesn't have much of an appetite to pass anything at this point. So I would say that that's probably a safe bet.
Yeah. For us, it's keeping an eye on Germany or Prague or Czech Republic, which one is going to get out of the guns first. So hopefully for the rest of Europe and the global industry that one of them gets it sorted by the end of 23, start of 24.
Can't wait.
It's been amazing talking to you, Chris. Thank you very much for taking your time. I know you're a very busy man, so I'll let you go. For anybody who wants to learn more about the INCBA, the website is below and it'll be on all the links no matter what platform you're watching or listening on. Highly recommend checking them out. They're a top legal source in the global industry. So, Chris, thank you very much again for taking the time.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Until next episode, everybody.